We're going to do this as a very rapid fire thing, and I can see that this afternoon is a reality check afternoon. So we're going to do a reality check on education. But before that, a quick thing we are announcing and releasing a report. So Amit, over to you.
Yes, sure. So this is the foundational literacy and numeracy report that we have been doing for a number of years. And this is the third cohort. The first two cohorts we had done with the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. But this is the one that we are doing as an independent report this year. So that's where it is. So could we just do that, please? The honors. And of course, I must mention that this has been supported by Room to Read and USAID. So all the follies of the report are mine. All the results are, I am taking care of it. So it's my research. It is just that USAID and Room to Read just supported the work. It is our work. So that's please be clear about that.
We're in it together.
Perfect. So record Karen. So we are in it together. She has endorsed the results, and she is part of it. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. If we can just quickly do the picture, and we're all set. And over to the panel,
Thank
please.
you. So, I'm going to quickly begin by asking Michael, give us two good points coming out of your report and two things which we need to worry about.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you, Stanford and IFC, for the invitation. It's a pleasure being here. Room to Read has a tagline, "World change begins with an educated child." I think after these 2 days, I can also modify that tagline and say, "World change requires an educated Indian child." And in fact, this is what we're speaking to today. I mean, first of all, the policy set out by the government is entering its third year. So I don't know in policy life if that makes it still a juvenile or still a child, but nevertheless, learnings are being received on how well the policy is doing to reach foundational literacy and numeracy in India. I think the report sets out, in classic sense, progress is being made. It's a progressive policy, and some of the assets of it are, of course, by district, state by state, you can see progress being made on numeracy, on fluency of literacy. Where policy is still being serviced not so well is in inefficiencies and gaps. And those occur typically, I think, around, again, more technical terms, how fluency is being used in addition to comprehension. And they're not against each other, but when we talk about making overall gains in literacy and numeracy, they're not opposed to each other. They need to be seen in correlation. So I think some of the gaps where we're seeing in delivering the services are occurring in other topics that we've already discovered in the last 2 days. There is an accountability problem sometimes in the middle tier between, say, the state government and the district government. There are issues around resourcing. Clearly, there are issues around teacher capacity, and this is something Room to Read spends quite a lot of time on. Often we say we're child-centric, and we are, but increasingly it's that teacher-centric role that we all need to play. I mean, I was just thinking about the data about this earlier. There are 8.5 million teachers in government schools in India. The armed forces of India is 1.4 million active members. So literally, this is an army of teachers in the country that are requiring different levels of service and training and mentoring. And in that classroom work is where I think the policy is starting to see, we're not reaching the goals. That instructional work, that mentoring work, of course, training, technology clearly plays a role. So those are some of the less desirable things that we're seeing yet district by district. I think on the positive side, and you always want to do a cookie approach, which is sweet, not so sweet, and sweet, the policy does certainly embrace a multilingual aspect to India's need around FLN. And this is clearly a requirement in such a vast country that has multilingual needs. Children do not walk into these rooms as a blank slate. They come with their culture, their own mother tongue, and increasingly, as we have been hearing as well, with internal migration, you're going to see more and more mixed classrooms where language is not matching to what the language of instruction is. So how we approach in India a multilingual approach is going to be very important. The policy does not get into that layers yet of the how. So clearly in the how, we have a ways to go on this.
Thank you. But do you recognize an intent and recognition of these challenges from the authorities?
I mean, my colleagues could speak to that much better than I. Yeah, the short answer is I think the aptitude, the receptivity around this is quite high. Now, of course, when you are still dealing with from school level, district level, state level, and then a national policy, you're going to find different levels of acceptance and understanding of how to make that work. Part of our role as an implementer in India is making some translations to that and trying to share those results at a demonstration model, at a
There is a will to
collaboration
experiment and try new models and,
Yes.
and to see what's going to work. So I think that's a very important positive takeaway. It's not like the government has said, we know what to do and we're going to do it our way, but it's ready and open to look at various models. I'm going to turn to Bhavya because she's the most recent graduate from a school, right? Not all of us, we are beyond post millennials. But I think the conversation is not just about early childhood, it's about how to lay the seeds for learning for generations, to how to create good, professional, solid citizens in the country. Your thoughts on where you see the focus on learning today?
So picking up from what the last speaker said, Mr. Garg said, whether the elephant moves, dances, sings, I think it's dependent on one very key demographic, and that's the adolescents and youth. It's wonderful that the national education policy considers children and is reimagining how we are thinking about education in the country, but we are not considering all of this entire demographic that has potentially been left behind when it comes to foundational literacy and numeracy. So if we look at some numbers, between 14 and 18 years of age, only 42% of young people in rural India are able to do basic math. They do not have arithmetic proficiency and are not able to read basic text. So even though the NEP talks about the concept of catch-up, are they actually being able to catch up? And is that not flatlining their curve of skill and upskilling themselves to actually compete in the real world?
Let me ask you, what would you have liked to have learned in school which you think you missed out on?
Lots of things. I think today data is so important. We are not taught anything about data analytics. We are not taught computer science in the best way. At least when I was in school, I don't know what's happening right now. Public speaking, that's something that you learn on the go. It's not something that is soft skills, transferable skills. You're not just supposed to have hard skills. Yes, that is important, but there are things that are transferable and that you're supposed to learn throughout life, which we are not taught in school at all, and it's not something that is even focused on. So a lot of hard and soft skills that are not focused on in school, which should potentially be brought in. And I see an entire generation being left out and actually feeling left out, because when I went into masters in a place that was outside of India, it took me 2 months to actually catch up and see what
I can tell you, Bhavya, that all of us and many of us who are 40 plus, we are also feeling left out today because the pace of change of technology is so high that nearly everybody has to go back to classroom. So I take what you're saying, but Mr. Das, I'm going to come to you to actually defend the national new education policy, because earlier we had a chat and you were saying that all the silos that the education policy had, that if you did science you could not do arts, if you did arts you could not do anything else. I think there's a fundamental shift in approach today. Can you, for those who don't know, can you give us the broad framework?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think we have a very good, and after a very long time, a really good education policy. And inevitably, it will lead to a much better form of learning, because it is not, it's saying burn the rote method, which has governed India for 75 years, rote learning. And they said inquiry, all the things, questioning, encouraging independent thought.
Critical thinking.
All these are, there's music to our ears that this policy has brought. Where So I mean, I could talk more, but this is the bottom line. What my concerns are really the same concerns I expressed before lunch. The basic issue in K-12 education is governance. And this was brought out by a very, very landmark study done 20 years ago by a Harvard economist, Michael Kramer. I think he went on to win the Nobel Prize too. And he showed that government schools in India, 1 out of 4 teachers was absent illegally on any particular moment. 1 out of 2 who was present was not teaching.
But this was in which year?
I think it was 2003 or something.
Right, so we are in 24. So my point today
Yeah, but
is that
it hasn't changed.
what my understanding is, and I don't know if anybody from can respond, but my understanding is the same Aadhaar biometrics has also brought some kind of controls on teacher attendance in schools.
I would like to have some facts, but these are the only facts that I have. I've been involved in this for 20 odd years because as a writer, I have been writing my Times of India column every year. At least 1 or 2 deal with education, so I do try to keep in touch with what's going on. And secondly, I'm also associated with an NGO,
Right.
which is focused on education, primary education. So let me just quickly sum up.
30 seconds, please, yeah.
That the issue also is teachers, that only 6% of teachers in the largest state in India, UP, qualified in the TET, which is the teacher eligibility test, meaning that 90%, more than 90% teachers were just not qualified. Qualified meaning they were unable to answer the fundamental questions that they were meant to. So it's the method of recruitment of teachers, as we all know, has been mired in corruption.
And you remembering the fact that this is mostly at the state level.
Yeah, this is all.
It's not a national government.
No. It's all, education is a state subject.
Which means that there is variety and diversity in the way each state government addresses education, which
Yes.
creates some kind of, mismatch as well.
Yes,
So,
as a result. No,
yeah.
but wait a minute. What does a poor person do who has a child in a government school where teachers are not teaching and teachers are not qualified? You then do what my helper at the home does. She takes her daughter and puts her in what we call a budget private school, where she pays 500 rupees a month fees for her daughter, hoping that there she will get a good education. And she's particularly keen for the child to learn English and computers, which is what the school also promises. Now, certainly their teachers show up there, there's a lot more motivation, but the outcomes are not commensurate. This is hard-earned money that
I think, Mr. Das, we should also look at what has changed in the last few years and look at what are the ways in which things can be improved. So
But let me just, I'll just take a minute to finish
okay. 30 seconds,
argument.
Sure.
Why is it, India has the largest number of children today in private school. 47.5% of India's children are in private schools. When we conjure up the thought of private school, we think of elite schools. But these are private. And why are government schools, private schools not performing as well? That's because we have not had the same kind of reform that we had in industry in 1991.
So I think
reform, and
right.
therefore, this is a very, very important issue.
My point is,
relates to the subject.
Mr. Das, we should look at what's happening in the future. No, I'm saying we should look at the future. We know what the past has been.
Well, we don't know what the past has been because we are talking about. I get frustrated because let's come to grips with the nitty-gritty on the ground. That the reality is that private schools could be far better if they were not mired in corruption, that the running a private school means having to pay bribes every year, year after year.
Absolutely agree with you. My point is, let's look at solutions, and I'm going to come to Omar for that. Omar, tell us some of the, you made a brilliant statement earlier when we were chatting today that a teacher is not a blank slate, right? So they come with a legacy of experience, but they're also the people who perhaps are resistant to change. And when you talk about the report which Michael talked about, the question is, what are the ways in which these new models can be enabled, accelerated by this community?
That's an excellent question and a very difficult question in terms of solutions. Just to step back, I think, what we have heard over the last couple of days is about transformation, reform, the importance of education across the different sectors. I think the point of transformation is critical here. For us to be able to really achieve the goals of foundational literacy and numeracy, which is a sub-goal. It's not the primary goal. The goal is the SDG 4 goal to ensure quality, inclusive, equitable, lifelong education for everybody. But we know that literacy and numeracy is key. However, as we have heard in the panels and the discussions, it's not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. We need the socio-emotional learning. We need the soft skills. We need what we call at Brookings the breadth of skills. And the breadth of skills is different in every context. The context of Silicon Valley is not going to work in India,
where we have 17 languages at least.
Exactly. So I think there's the first part. I'll do 3 parts. The first part, I think, is a national dialogue on what the overall purposes of education are. We want education for economic development, which the panel is based on, but education is way broader than that. It's about national identity, it's about well-being, it's about spiritual and cultural enrichment. These are all different purposes that a country has to deal with. And
you see the teachers as the vehicle for infusing all this?
Exactly.
Are they ready for it?
I think there was a comment earlier this morning about, in the roundtable, that each teacher, and I think Richard made that comment, that each teacher is sort of a mini ministry of education. Education really becomes alive in the classroom. I think what we need to think about is transforming our educational system, number one, to go beyond the schooling model that's about 200 years old, to look at what is needed in today's age. The Transforming Education Summit 2 years ago in the UN focused on that. Number two, we need to prepare our teachers not only with new things, but to build on their professionalism and build on their legacies and what they come in with. Many times we try to prepare teachers to do things new, and subliminally we're telling them that you're no good, and nobody takes that.
I think that's where the balance is required. How do you match what they know with the new ways in which they can perhaps articulate it?
And I think that the challenge, it's very fitting that we're in an engineering building. There's a concept called combination invention, which I'm sure all of the engineers know, that no real innovation, no big changes come as a single invention. It's the ability to combine different things in a smart way to answer your question. So I think part of the solution is to prepare our teachers with that mentality. How can we give them the tools where they can draw upon maybe artificial intelligence, maybe on community resources, with literacy and numeracy, this is not something new. We have done that much better in the past.
We'll
than
have
we
to
have done
come
it
to
now.
some of these ideas and the solutions for that. You raised very critical questions, but I'm going to come to Karen now. Karen, you've been enabling as head of USAID, and you just came back from a brilliant stint in New Delhi as well, right? So you must have seen a lot of this happening on ground. USAID's, policy, strategy, and action. Can you give us a glimpse of what has been your focus?
So in India and around the world, USAID is focused on the numeracy and literacy, foundational numeracy and literacy, as the foundation, right? So in India, we're partnering with the government and our partners like Room to Read to provide training of trainers for teachers, to support the teachers to improve the quality of education, which many of the panelists had talked about.
Exactly. So what Mr. Das said and Omar said is it's the teachers that have to be the focus.
It's the teachers that have to be the focus. We've all had good teachers and bad teachers. I'll use an example of my son right now who's studying chemistry. He hated chemistry and thought he wants to study criminology. Now he has a chemistry teacher who has made it alive for him. He's empowered, he enjoys it, and he's changing his entire course of study, right? So if we can get teachers to engage the students at an early age, then hopefully we'll create the lifelong learners that we're hoping to get. We are also developing reading materials in mother tongue. So we already said 17 languages in India. We know that if students are taught at an early age in their mother tongue and then transfer, they're going to have better learning outcomes. So we're focused on that and partnering on that in India. We're setting up libraries in schools.
Do you have good results on that so far?
Yeah, very good. But we're setting up libraries too so that students have access to these books that are in mother tongue. And one of the things we saw during COVID is many of the parents who are illiterate also started accessing books in these libraries. And then they were reading as families and encouraging their children to read, and the parents understood the importance of the kids getting access to these books and continuing their reading. Another important thing that gets to the quality and the reform that you were talking about is advocating at the state level for increased resources and increased support for the teachers. The teachers are critical and spend so much time with the children, is we need to advocate for them and support them. And then finally, I would say we're also focused on expanding access of education for girls, to make sure the girls are getting the equal education, staying in school, and being educated, which I think is very critical into what if India wants to see.
And one of the fascinating things in India is actually the midday meal scheme, which brings a lot of kids to the school. Not so much education, but actually the meal, which is actually a huge, completely lateral way of approaching education for many of the families. But I'm going to do an Amit Kapoor on myself and try to stand up and say we have to end quickly. But let's take some thoughts and questions from all of you. Can we have the mics ready, please? Okay, now we have like all these hands. Okay, I have to test my numeric abilities to count all the hands and go to them. But can we go? Okay, can you all raise the hands? Let me see who hasn't asked a question so far. Okay, the lady in the corner over there and the lady in the corner over here. Let's begin with both of you. We'll collect your questions and come back. Kindly introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mary Alber. I'm launching an education innovation collaborative, Thrivetown, and my question is, everything you've just talked about is almost identical to what's going on in the United States.
Thank you for saying that.
Right?
Really, thank you. Because people will think that India is this crazy basket case.
No.
It's not.
No, totally. And I almost think there might be more going on at the central level in India that's good, that we need to replicate. But one of the things I heard that jumped out at me was, how do we sort of model, I forget the term that was used by one of you about demo it, right? Demo it and do it the new way outside of the existing school, because the existing school structure and sort of policies and practices of the teaching workforce is so different than the inquiry-based and the project-based and the SDG goals, right? We want every kid to be doing that. So do you see a model where we could, I'd love to have like a prototype demo Thrivetown here, one in India. And we could kind of do a parallel study of how we can actually make significant major change.
Excellent. Thank you for the offer. I'm sure the panelists will come back to you on this offline as well. But the lady here, thank you. Kindly introduce yourself.
Okay, I am Indrani Singh, and I have been associated with education for more than 30 years, and out of which 12 years I was a principal of a K-12 school in India, and that was a private school affiliated to CISC. So I have a number of points which I've written down. Quickly, I'll
Begin
just...
with one only, please. Yeah.
No, just quickly. Okay, first is, Mr. Gurcharan Das, aapne kaha that rote learning is something which is still kind of practiced in India. And I think that is something we need to bring about a change grossly, because students learn from the examination point of view, not being a lifelong learner.
Ma'am, can you ask the question, because it'll be good to...
Okay, as far as the question is concerned, I'm really happy to see Bhavya as a young advocate for mental well-being, and I have been an advocate for mental well-being since 2011. Now, despite counseling services in the university in the US and counselors in each and every school, still there is a lot of problems with emotional well-being of the students. How does India address that?
Okay, quickly. So on new model, maybe, Michael, you want to come in on this, and Mr. Das, if you want to quickly intervene on this. New model?
No, I think in part our program, which USAID is a gracious donor to, is our theory has changed, is based on demonstration, collaboration, and expansion. And it's been said here before, it's all about scale. We cannot reach 250 million children by going school by school as an NGO. Clearly, that's something we don't want to do. So it's all about government seeing the results, feeling the results, and using that for themselves and resourcing it, more importantly. So our model is definitely based on that scaffolding of demonstration, collaboration, and expansion, where it's all up to the state to take that on after they see the demonstration value. I mean, we work in 12 states. That's not enough in India.
Out of 29.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work to do. And clearly, some of the social, emotional wellness as well spills into our literacy programming. We have a girls' education component as well in India. But frankly, most of our staff time is focused on counseling and supporting that teacher, that administrator, and engaging with the community and families.
And you're ready to work with the new partners as she's offered?
Oh, absolutely. We work in the United States as well.
Mr. Das, on rote learning, how can we really address that?
Well, I think the big step is taken where the policy now is very clear. They want to burn rote learning out. And nobody has said it in such clear, simple way as this policy does. So one has to really congratulate these people who came out with this a couple of years ago. I think it will take time. The teachers are not prepared for it. They have not learned, but it will happen in due course. And this has to happen both in the private sector as well as in the public sector, because government has imposed that rote learning also in the private schools. And the point that I was making is that while all this is very good, the pedagogical thing to go for, what we need is the same kind of 1991 type reforms that we had in industry to bring accountability. And you know, it's heartbreaking that people spend hard-earned money to put their children into private schools. They give up. In a government school, they get free uniforms, free school books, free midday meals, and still they're willing to forego that in order so that the learning outcomes improve. And so this is almost like to me, the biggest priority is to remove the license Raj out of it and break up the government ministry with a regulator who regulates the whole of industry and those people who run government schools. See, there's a conflict of interest.
Right. So I'll have to ask you to hold here. Quickly, your response on what she said.
Yeah, so I was not in a very different room a few months ago, and you'll be surprised to see how many young people actually want a safe and supportive environment around them. The point of me saying that is that we don't just need to work with the students, we also need to work with the community around them. So the two can't work in silos. They have to work in tandem with one another. So unless a young person feels supported, their mental and physical well-being will not reach its full potential. So the first thing that we actually need to do is actually ask young people, what do you want? What do you think will make you feel best?
That dialogue is actually is I think not always there. So let's take one more round of questions. Okay, the lady there, these two ladies, and there was a gentleman at the back, right, and Asha. So can we quickly, and please keep it as precise as possible.
Yeah, it's not a question, basically a comment. Two things. One, to de-risk ourselves from AI. I know it's a different point of view. The intent is to create the next wave of green jobs, and how we can do of green jobs,
Okay.
which is not dependent on AI and not necessarily can be replaced, so that we don't have massive layoffs all at the same time.
Okay, so I think, so I'll have to again ask you to pause here because AI is on the cover of this report. So I'm not sure we can de-link from AI right now, but let's have a discussion on that maybe. Another topic for another session. Amit, please take note. Your team can do that. The lady next to you, I think there was another one. Yes. Go ahead. It'll pump up.
Yeah, so I completely agree with
Please use the mic. The voice will come up.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with the point which Mr. Gurujar and Das has made, that I'll just give you the latest statistics, like from UNESCO report, No Teacher, No Class, 2021, about 500,000 teachers are not there in UP and Bihar.
So tell us a solution, because
Solution is that, no, I'm asking the question, and I wish there was somebody here on the panel from the ministry or from the education, from the government, because the value placed at the profession of being a teacher in government school is low, and that is also one of the cultural context which has to be dealt with.
So there's some discussions to have with the lady in the front and the gentleman with the mic over there.
Yeah, so hi, I'm here. I'm a venture capitalist here in the Bay Area. I also teach entrepreneurship at Stanford. So the question I want to ask is about how can we incorporate our traditional education system of India into the current modern system. Because I really liked one point that Omar made, that education system is not just about learning, it's also about the values and culture.
Completely agree. I was going to mention the Gurukul system, but I don't know whether anybody, including me, is qualified to speak on that. But please go ahead here, then Asha, and then Himanshu. And then we'll close.
I'm Nirmala Shankaran. I run a venture called HeyMath, and we've been upskilling teachers for the last 24 years in mathematics. And talking about reforms in education, I think the best example is right next door to India, which is Singapore. And they started their reforms by saying, thinking schools, learning nation, in 1997. I feel post-COVID, people have understood the value of digitization of content in education. And I think technology can be a fantastic way for us to build teaching capacity. So this is something I would like to talk to some of the panelists post this conversation.
Perfect. Himanshu and then Asha.
I don't see any reference to for-profit companies in this space by the panel. An example
we have only 25 minutes.
No, an example is LEAD. The point I'm trying to make is they're covering about 10,000, the private schools you referred to, Mr. Das, and covering about 5 million students, 50,000 teachers, training them, really upgrading the standard of living, standard of education. I'm not sure whether we are looking at that as a potential solution. And I wanted to get an opinion.
What is the potential solution?
Because to me, this is a great solution compared to a layman who's not studied this domain. This can be a great solution because here, you don't have to put in money to have a for-profit solution to a social issue.
Great. I think India's law, Asha, India's law actually does not allow for-profit education. That's still one of those challenges. Asha?
A question about the school in the cloud. There was a lot of buzz a few years ago about Sugata Mitra and his school in the cloud. Remember, he did hole in the wall.
computer in the wall program.
Hole in the wall first, but then he also tried school in the cloud, and he got $1 million from TED.com for for a pilot. Does any of you have any data or any thoughts about what happened to that project? It was very popular a few years ago.
I don't know. So the lady behind you, and then we'll come back to the panel for a quick response.
So earlier you talked about the midday meal program, and tying back to the previous session on nutrition and healthy lifestyle in India, I wanted to pass on a recommendation to the government to include physical activity in middle schools in addition to the midday meal program, because I think as they progress in their careers, they just get busy and they don't necessarily think about physical education, so it's good to inculcate it early on.
You know, I would also say, Amit, I can speak on your behalf, if I can say, Amit and Richard are here, that you can send some of these suggestions to the team of India Dialogue. I'm sure they're going to be incorporating it in the reports and the studies which are going to be out. So I'm going to quickly request all of you to respond in 30 seconds. There are several issues. Unfortunately, we cannot unpack and go on for many for time, reasons of time. But Mr. Das, quickly your response and come to everybody.
I'll just take up this one question about for-profit.
Yeah.
This is the result of this hypocrisy. A private school to survive, it must make a profit. And to say that you can't make a profit, everybody has to be false, have to make a false declaration, keep false set of books. And so the good news is that we are going to challenge this. It's a 1989 judgment called the Unni Krishnan judgment by a Supreme Court judge who said that education, there should not be any profit in education. And so now that half of India's children, 120 million children, are in private school, it is time to remove this hypocrisy, and this is something that's going to happen in the next. The worry is, of course, the government is withholding permission for NGOs. You know, the FCRA permission. All NGOs are worried that they may lose their FCRA status. If they lose their FCRA, they'll have to close down. And that includes the NGO that I referred to.
Right, sir.
And so, but we are hoping to get our FCRA in the next 6 months.
That's an issue to address urgently.
But the reality is that now the whole industry or education, private education industry, is ready to challenge this hypocrisy.
Thank you. Omar, 30 seconds.
30 seconds, okay. So we're trying to accomplish all of this with one system that is a schooling system 200 years old. The education system across the world needs to evolve, and this includes connecting traditional educational system, connecting high-end artificial intelligence, connecting private schools, private courses, and rethinking about education in terms of an ecosystem. I think we cannot address these questions and these challenges by trying to fit a solution into a system that is bureaucratic, that is got issues of accountability. And last point, there's a lot of points, but last 2 points. There's an issue of accessibility. We need to make sure that education is equitable, accessible, and quality for everybody. Otherwise, you're going to have problems down the road that are going to come back at India at a large, in a very big way. The last point being that, going back to teachers, making sure that our ecosystem is supportive of teachers in a way where they can actually feel incentivized. The fact that teachers are not going to classrooms, it's not only an accountability issue. There are many other factors that are there. We need to figure that out.
Thanks.
I think I'm at my 30 seconds.
You can say so much more, Omar, but I'm going to have to ask you to pause. Okay. Yes, yes.
Some of the stuff that
right,
I was
Karen.
Say, but I will say reform takes time, just like development. And if you're reforming from a road system to a system of inquiry and thought from teachers that were taught through the road system, it's going to take time. So you need to invest in the quality. You need to ensure equal access for everyone. Oops, my mic. You need to ensure equal access of education for everyone so that there's no child left behind. Increase the quality, support the teachers, demonstrate successes and models that work, and then use that to advocate at the state level for increased funding to support those teachers and to bring in models that work within the system. Thank you.
Yeah, just picking up on the for-profit point, I think if there is a law that doesn't allow it, we should figure out a way that it gets figured out, because if we don't want to invest in strengthening the demographic dividend, then we won't be able to leverage the strengths of those demographic dividends at all, ever.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you to respond to anything, but my question to you is about tech. You put AI on the cover, and there was a concern about that. So again, 30 seconds, what role can tech play in this?
I think tech continues to show a role on where we make things more efficient for teachers in particular, and for administrators, digitizing things for one. We're already looking at a pilot AI that would work around a teacher training module, right, self-led. Those are early days, and I think AI will continue to come into it. And I just want to make a plug around, again, not just AI. One thing Room to Read does is we are actually a publisher of children's books, obviously not for sale, but in India, we have 225 titles in 7 languages. That's all private-public partnership ecosystem play. They're not brought in. These are Indian authors, Indian illustrators. They are leveled in a way that grabs a child's attention and they want to read that book. So that's the level of innovations in digitization that we're on a pathway to continue to scale in India.
Thank you. Apologies from me. My apologies if all the questions were not answered, but the idea was to raise as many thoughts as possible in the hall so that we can connect and work on them and look at collaborative efforts. Please join me in thanking everybody who participated. I felt a little bit like the pilot whose flight is taken off late and has to land on time still. So I've tried to land on time. Amit, please do recognize that. Thank you so much.